strategy for Charles to start on the soft looked like the best strategy today. It really worked out pretty well. Is that an area where maybe they can improve on your side, or would you have been able to do something with that strategy today as well? Is that an area you want to look at?
It's a difficult one. I think it was clearly the quickest strategy in the end. For me, going on to them, I lost obviously so much time. I was kind of right with them. Obviously, before Charles' stop, I was right with him, and then to come out 10 seconds behind, that definitely was a far too big a deficit for me to try and catch, and I couldn't close the gap at all. So a bit unfortunate with that in that respect. But considering we've not been upgrading the car for us to be kind of in the fight, it shows that the team's done a really, really great job this weekend. So I hope everyone back at the factory is happy. And yeah, we're definitely on the right path. I'm so close, still not got that podium, but I'll keep trying.
Thank you.
Lewis Hamilton has just released some words that seem positive, but they hide a brutal technical truth. Is Ferrari really making progress, or is it all a smokescreen? Stay, because what Hamilton said after the race in Austin reveals a lot more than it seems. Lewis Hamilton finished the 2025 United States Grand Prix in 4th position. On paper, that result should not raise any alarms. For any other driver, in another context, it could even be considered an outstanding performance. But we are not talking about just any pilot. We are talking about the 7-time world champion. And we're not talking about just any team either. We talk about Ferrari. This 4th place was not experienced as an achievement, but as an uncomfortable mirror of everything that is not working under the surface. There is something deeply symbolic about that result. It represents, with surgical precision, the current Ferrari roof. That's your limit. That is the maximum they seem to be able to offer one of the most successful drivers in history. And that has a much greater emotional and sporting weight than the figures reflect. Hamilton crossed the finish line behind his own teammate Charles Leclerc. The two Ferraris finished 3rd and 4th. Overall, it was one of the best points hauls for the Scuderia so far this year. But if you look at the entire development of the weekend, that result is immediately tainted by the feeling that it was more of a well-managed fluke than real progress. In his post-race remarks, Hamilton opted for a measured, diplomatic tone. He said it was a good result, that finishing ahead of Mercedes and McLaren was positive, and that there were redeemable aspects even after a bad start. But what was truly revealing was not what he said, but what he omitted, what was left to be read between the lines. Hamilton did not celebrate. He didn't seem excited. He didn't convey the energy of someone who feels like they're building toward something bigger. Instead, his final sentence was a kind of hopeful resignation. Naturally, I want to be higher up, so I just have to keep working at it. That phrase encapsulates everything. It is not a message of motivation, but of self-affirmation. This is what a driver says who struggles with the daily frustration of seeing how his talent cannot unlock the potential of a machine that is not at his level. That's what a champion who has seen this scenario before says. A car that promises but doesn't deliver. And worse still, an organization that seems to be trapped in an eternal reconstruction. The context makes everything more complex. Ferrari has been promising a resurgence for years. Starting in 2022, each season begins with the promise that this time is different. That now they do have the tools, the people, the strategy. And yet, every year, reality ends up crashing against that narrative. Hamilton's 4th place finish in Austin was unintentionally a perfect summary of this pattern. A respectable performance packaged as progress, but deeply marked by the technical and structural limitations of a team that still doesn't know how to win again. And for Hamilton, this result hits harder because he arrived with a new hope in 2025. His arrival at Ferrari was not simply a team change. It was a statement, an attempt to write a new chapter. But what was found in Austin was an old reality, dressed in red. Promise, potential, and a result that, although numerically solid, was not a podium. And above all, it was not what he had imagined when he signed that contract. This 4th place, then, was not just another position in the table. It was a warning, a reminder that the top is still far away. And that time, for Hamilton, is no longer a renewable resource. The contrast between his words on Sunday and those he gave on Friday and Saturday in Austin is a perfect example of this emotional dissonance. On Saturday, after a disappointing sprint qualifying, his voice let out a mix of disbelief and technical frustration. It wasn't the pace we expected. I don't know where it went. 8/10 is a mountain to climb. That last sentence is not just another comment. It's a confession. An indirect way of saying that, although he continues to believe in his ability, he is beginning to distrust the technical package he has in his hands. And that stings more when it comes from someone who built his entire career on technical excellence. Hamilton was always a master at adapting his driving to changing conditions. But this year, that talent has been tested like few times before. Because it's not just about finding the rhythm. It's about having to rebuild trust with a car that behaves differently every weekend. A car that seems competitive in one session and in the next, disappears from the map. That mountain you mentioned isn't just about lap time. It is a psychological mountain. Because when a pilot has to face an unstable tool, his mind begins to fill with doubts. And doubts in Formula One cost tenths. They cost confidence in braking. They cost precision in traction. They cost the ability to push to the limit. Ferrari at this point in the season does not offer certainties, offers performance flashes, offer promises. But in practice, what Hamilton is experiencing is an emotional roller coaster. Every weekend there are moments of hope, a decent practice, a good run, a fourth place that seems positive but that are quickly buried by very harsh realities. Lack of rhythm, questionable operational decisions, and, above all, technical problems that are not resolved. One of those key problems, and perhaps the most insidious, is constant understeer. During qualifying on Sunday, Hamilton revealed that he had to make 8 adjustments to the front wing. That's not normal. It's not a small touch-up. It is a desperate attempt to compensate for a car that is born unbalanced, with a weight distribution and an aerodynamic window that simply does not collaborate with the driver's driving style. And yet, on Sunday after the race, the tone was different. Hamilton appeared more composed. He talked about improvements, good points, of being on the right path. What changed? Not the car. The operational approach changed. Ferrari, after the Singapore disaster, adjusted its internal processes. Better communication, better management of temperature windows, better synchronization between engineers and pilot. That was what Hamilton wanted to highlight. That even though the car is still problematic, at least the execution over the weekend was more consistent. But this is where the conflict intensifies, because Hamilton is an elite driver, and he is not in Ferrari to fight for fourth places. He didn't sign on to see minor procedural improvements. He came to win, to return Ferrari to the top. And every time those expectations intersect with the harsh reality of an unresponsive car, the conflict deepens. The most difficult thing about all this is that Hamilton is not facing an external enemy. He's facing something much more complex. The possibility that this team, with all its history, its budget and its talent, simply won't be able to give him a winning car. Not in 2025. And maybe not in 2026 either. And in that tension between what is said and what is felt, between what is promised and what is delivered, is where the true conflict of this stage of Hamilton at Ferrari lies. It's not just a battle against the stopwatch. It is a daily struggle not to lose faith in a project that, until now, has not returned what he expected. In Formula One, big changes are not always announced with fireworks. Sometimes, transformation begins in the invisible, in the way a team makes decisions, in the processes that happen behind closed doors, in the way engineers communicate with drivers. What happened at Ferrari after the Singapore Grand Prix was not a revolution visible from the outside. But it was, without a doubt, a quiet turning point. Hamilton was explicit in acknowledging this. He said they tried something different, that they changed how they run the sessions, that improved communication, track start timing, tire preparation, and mental focus. And most importantly, that those little things worked. That, coming from a driver who rarely hands out empty praise, is significant. Not because it implies that Ferrari has already solved its problems, but because it confirms that they have stopped repeating the same basic mistakes. And most worryingly, the magnitude of the adjustments Hamilton had to make during qualifying reveals an even starker truth. 8 adjustment holes in the front spoiler is not a correction. It is a desperate compensation. It is trying to find stability in a car that does not have it structurally. And these types of problems are not solved with improved processes or more precise simulations. They are resolved by redesigning from the base. And that can't be done in the middle of the season. Therefore, this weekend's apparent resolution is misleading. Because it is not an outcome but a truce, a momentary respite. Ferrari has not solved the problem. It has only stopped making it worse. And that, although it represents progress, is not enough for a team that aspires to win. The last lap of the Grand Prix was a perfect metaphor. Hamilton, on the verge of losing control due to brake failure, struggling with sudden understeer, believing he had a puncture, managed to finish fourth almost by reflex. And in that desperate maneuver, in that instinctive save, the state of Ferrari is summed up. They survive thanks to individual talent, not because of the solidity of the team. You've seen how a few quotes from Lewis Hamilton can open the door to a much deeper conversation about Ferrari, about modern Formula One, and about what it means to be at the top, or constantly trying to get back to it. But this is just the surface. If this fourth place in Austin already leaves us with a complex story, imagine what we can discover if we fully explore what has been happening within Ferrari since the beginning of the season. Because the truth is that all of this doesn't start in the United States. It all started long before. In Singapore, in pre-season testing and internal decisions that are still affecting the performance of the SF25 today. What Hamilton experienced in Austin is the consequence of a series of accumulated errors, of technical decisions that are now taking their toll. How are the differences between the car's axles affecting the driving? And above all, how are these limitations conditioning not only Hamilton but also Leclerc? Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.